Hi everybody, welcome to the final festive season vlog for 2022. I hope you all had a wonderful Christmas. Mine was really nice. I went and visited with my family, my parents and my sister and her family, and we just had a really good time. So I've been off work this week and the week after Christmas and have done a lot of cooking, a lot of watching old movies, and just kind of relaxing, taking naps. What I haven't done much of is reading, unfortunately. I seem to be in kind of a year-end slump, and I really didn't read very much in December altogether in spite of having that huge TBR that I showed you guys at the beginning of my vlogging. So, it's okay. December is such a hectic month. There's always so much to do. So the fact that I didn't get a whole bunch done is fine. So one thing I think we all tend to do at this time of year is sort of reflect back on the year we just came through, and look ahead to the year to come and see what goals or resolutions or whatever you want to call them we might want to do for the following year. So I thought it would be fun to share with you my top 10 books that I read in 2022. So when I look back at this year, I read 79 books. Which sounds like a pretty decent amount, and it is. A lot of them were rereads, a lot of them were middle grade. I listened to more audiobooks this year than I really ever have before. I'm not the biggest audiobook fan, but when it comes to rereads of things, I do like to listen to audiobooks, or if it's like a memoir or something read by the author. Like this year I did read David Sedaris's new book through audiobook. I listened to a memoir by Diane Cannon about her marriage to Cary Grant through audiobook, and those I enjoy. I just find with new to me fiction, a lot of times I have a hard time concentrating and my mind will wander and then I forget, I don't even know what's going on with the book. So usually I save audiobooks for either nonfiction of some kind or rereads of favorites. And this year I did listen to the first James Herriot book, which was a really great reread read by Christopher Timothy. And I've been working my way through the Little House on the Prairie audiobook series, which was a childhood favorite that I was absolutely obsessed with as a kid. And it's been so much fun to listen to them on audio. I'm currently, just this month, I started listening to The Long Winter, which seemed appropriate. We were in the middle of a really cold snap. So I thought I would start listening to that, and I'm having a great time. They're read by Cherry Jones, and it's really nice because she's a great narrator, and there's also fiddle music throughout at the beginning and end of chapters. She sings sometimes when Pa is singing a song, and it just adds so much to the atmosphere of the books. So highly recommend the Little House on the Prairie audiobooks if you like that series. As far as my top 10 favorites for this year, I feel like I didn't have as many great reads this year as I did in 2021. 2021 was just such a good year. I read book after book that was an instant favorite, 5-star read, things that I'm still thinking about this year and looking forward to rereading at some point in the future. This year I had a lot of comforting rereads, and I did have some new to me books that I really liked a lot, but it just wasn't quite all the home runs that I had last year. But a lot of enjoyable books, and some that definitely will be on my list of favorites and things I want to reread in the future. So I just put them in the order that I read them this year, and thought I'd go through and show you what my top favorites were for 2022. So in January of this year, I read Rosamund Pilcher's Winter Solstice, and just loved it so much. So I did talk about this one in one of my previous vlogs because I had intended to read it again already in December. I didn't get to it, but I hope to get to it in January because it's just the most perfect winter cozy read. And I talked about it. I won't go into too much detail because I talked about it previously, but it's just a story of found family, takes place in England, and it contains all the wonderful cozy domestic details that Rosamund Pilcher's known for. Reading one of her books is just like, I don't know, like getting wrapped in the most cozy, warm blanket and given a delicious cup of hot chocolate and put in front of the fire and just everything taken care of that you would want to have a really cozy experience. That's what Rosamund Pilcher is to me. So definitely looking forward to reading this one again, and it is on my list of favorites for 2022. Next up is The Railway Children by E. Nesbitt. This was one of the Kindred Spirits Book Club's picks, and I had seen the movie version, one of the movie versions, the more recent one, years ago, and liked it, but I had never read the book. And the book is just wonderful. The movie is really good too, but the book, of course, as is usual, surpasses that. It's such a touching story about children that are put into difficult circumstances when their father is accused of a crime and suddenly disappears. They don't know where he's been. Their mother is sort of circumspect about everything, and they end up having to move from their kind of luxurious house, upper middle class house in London to a sort of small and less comfortable house in the country. And it's just about the adventures they go through during that period, the hard times they have, the funny times, and has such a happy ending. So really enjoyed this book a lot. It has a lot of humor and a lot of heart, and I definitely look forward to reading this one again. Next up, I read Greensleeves by Eloise Jarvis McGraw, and this is one of my top books for the year. It was published in 1968, and this author is more known for her historical fiction for children. This is more of a young adult, contemporary for that time in the 60s. And it's a coming-of-age story about a young woman who is not quite sure what she wants to do with her life, is not quite pleased with her own personality, and so she moves out on her own through a various set of circumstances and meets people that she, otherwise wouldn't have met in life, and sort of finds romance. And it's just a very I don't want to say too much about it because I really knew nothing about it other than that it was recommended by Nancy Pearl, who's a famous librarian and book editor. And she has a great track record with me of picking books that are really enjoyable. Anyway, so I like this one so much, and fortunately, Kate Howe has selected it for the Kindred Spirits Club in 2023, so I'll get to reread it, and I'm really looking forward to that. I hope everyone else ends up liking it as much as I did. Keeping on with the theme of books with green in the title, Greenery Street by Dennis McHale. This book is delightful. It's a Persephone book, as you can tell if you're familiar with Persephone publishers in England. It has beautiful end paper. I've had this book on my shelf for years and hadn't picked it up, and finally did this year, and I'm so glad I finally did. It is so witty and warm and smart and just delightful. It's about an upper middle class couple of newlyweds in London. Takes place in the 1920s. Sort of that interwar period is just my favorite, and it's just charming. It's just a delight. So Dennis McHale's writing is so impressive to me. I just thought it was so much fun, and I wish someone would publish more of his books because apparently he wrote a lot of things. He even wrote some sequels to Greenery Street, but they're all out of print as far as I can see. This is the only one. So Persephone, if you're listening, anybody, if you're listening, please bring us more Dennis McHale. We really need it. Another favorite from this year was The Lake House by Kate Morton. Kate Morton is a fairly new discovery for me. I started reading her books, I think last year was when I started reading them. And I've read a couple others, but this is the only one I read this year. But her books are so good. They are, it's hard for me sometimes to find contemporary authors that give me that vibe, that feeling that I get with authors from the past. And she definitely does that. She has such attention to detail, such atmosphere in her stories, and she always has sort of a mystery involved as far, as someone from the present time is finding out and unveiling secrets from the past. This book is related to an upper class family in England in the 1930s, and they had a child kidnapped. And they never found the child, and how it affected all the family members, and eventually the truth comes out about what happened. So it's just really great storytelling. She is one of my absolute favorites. And if I could write anything myself, I would want to write books like Kate Morton. Her stories just have a really old-fashioned vibe in the best way, And so yeah, I'm looking forward to reading more of her books in 2023. She has a new book coming out in April, which is really exciting as well. So it's great to have a contemporary author that I love so much, because there's always hope of new books, whereas, most of my favorite authors have been dead for a long time, so you just have what you have. But Kate Morton is still out there writing, and I'm so glad about that. The next book in my top 10 list for 2022 is A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. So this book is another one that had been on my shelf for many years. I'd had many people recommend it to me, but for something was just holding me back from reading it. I don't know why, but I finally read it this year, and I'm really glad I did. It's the story of a young girl in the New York tenements in the early 1900s. Her name's Francie Nolan, and she's a very smart girl, very literate. She loves reading and learning, but she lives in really disadvantaged circumstances. So anything that comes to getting ahead or getting an education is a huge struggle for her and for her family. Her father is an alcoholic, a very loving man, but with his problems. Her family goes through a lot of ups and downs, and it's not the easiest read, honestly, just because you feel so much for these poor people that are struggling and facing prejudice because of their poverty and just not having the opportunities that others might have. But it was a really good book, a really heartwarming book, and in the end, ultimately an uplifting and hopeful one. So I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad I finally read it this year. Another one of my top picks for this year was The Pursuit of Love by Nancy Mitford. Again, same story. This has been on my shelf for a long time, and I finally read it. It was a buddy read with my friend Jennifer from Jen's Reading Life, and we both really enjoyed it a lot. Nancy Mitford's writing is very sharp and witty and satirical. You really get to know this family that is very eccentric, and is based on her family, which is kind of the famous or infamous Mitford family. And, there's heartache, there's humor, and a lot of kind of wacky things that happen with this family. And it's set during the interwar years and leading into World War II. So yeah, very interesting, fun read. And I'm looking forward to continuing on with the second book in the series, which is also in my volume. It's called Love in a Cold Climate. So I'm hoping to read that one in 2023. Next up on my list of top 10 new to me reads for the year was Far from the Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy. This is one of the books that I read for Victober, and it was my favorite new to me read for Victober. I also reread Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights, both of which are all-time favorites. But for brand new books and a brand new author to me, this was my top pick for Victober and one of my top books for the year. The writing is just absolutely gorgeous, so insightful, poetic, and atmospheric. The characterization is just so rich. It's the story of a man who is a farmer, Gabriel Oak, and he faces a really terrible situation that thrusts him back from his, he's just becoming a farmer. He's been a shepherd, and he finally is able to start out with his own farm, and a really tragic event occurs, and he is thrust back into being just a poor kind of itinerant shepherd again. And he goes to work for a young woman who he has fallen in love with, and she's rejected his proposal of marriage, and he ends up working for her. And Gabriel Oak is just the best character, the best hero of pretty much any romance novel you're ever going to find, which I would classify this definitely as a romance novel, classic literature, but also it just hits all those beautiful historical romance tropes that I love so much. And it's just so good. So can't wait to reread this one again, and can't wait to read more of Thomas Hardy's books in the coming years. It'll be hard to top this one though, because it was just full of angst and romance and beautiful language and tragedy and all the emotions that I just loved. And then it ended up with a happy ending, which I know not all of Thomas Hardy's books will do. But it's just a great book, and I highly recommend this one. Next up is The Year in Between by Christina Moreland. And this is a book that I might not even have heard about if not for Instagram. So Melissa from Libraries and Labradors on Instagram, and she's also on YouTube, which I'll post I'll link her channel below. But she had mentioned this book on Instagram as one that she had just received and was looking forward to reading. And it is a story that fills in the gap between the year in Sense and Sensibility, in which Eleanor and Edward Ferrars get married, and Marianne and Colonel Brandon get married. In the book, it's basically summarized towards the end of the novel that Eleanor and Edward get married, and then a year later, Marianne and Colonel Brandon get married. That leaves a lot to the imagination, and Christina Moreland has written a book that is very thick, chunky book, and just beautifully explores the possibilities of what that year might have been like, the first year of marriage for Eleanor, and then the courtship between Marianne and Colonel Brandon. And yeah, I zipped through this book so fast. I actually initially bought the ebook, and so I didn't really realize how long it was. So it didn't intimidate me. I just zipped through it in just a matter of a few days. And then when I liked it so much, I wanted the paperback, and I saw how big it was. I was kind of shocked because it did not feel this long when I was reading it. It was just so much fun. It really captures Jane Austen's world, I think. And it was, to me, just as good as The Other Bennet Sister, which came out, or which I read last year and thought was just wonderful, which was, of course, about Mary Bennet from Pride and Prejudice. So I'm very particular about Jane Austen retellings or fan fictions, and so I don't really recommend things too lightly, but this was excellent, and I highly recommend it. It's actually a self-published or independently published book, which can sometimes be iffy. But this one is not iffy. It's really great. So highly recommend this one if you love Jane Austen and Jane Austen related stories. Finally, in my favorites for the year is Happy All the Time by Laurie Colwin. And I talked about this one in a little more depth in a previous video as well, so I won't say too much about it. But it is just so beautifully written, romantic comedy at its best, and so charming and fun and funny. And yeah, I loved it. It's going to be one of my all-time comfort reads, I know, that I'll reach for again. And I'm really excited to read more of Laurie Colwin's books in the future. So that was my top 10 books that were new to me in 2022. Like I said, I did a lot of rereads. I did a lot of audiobooks. If you follow me on Goodreads, you can see all 79 books that I read this year. So I'll link that below in case you want to see the other books that I read and how I rank them. So yeah, I'm really excited about the year ahead. It's always fun to turn the calendar page to January and know that there's a lot more reading excitement ahead of you. New books, great rereads, and good discussions if you participate in different groups online or in person to talk about books with friends. So yeah, wishing you a wonderful reading year ahead. Hi everybody, happy New Year's Eve. So here I am in front of the tree for the last time this year. Most likely I will take the tree down either tomorrow or Monday if I have the energy to do so. I go back to work on Tuesday, and even though I know the 12 days of Christmas continues on till the 6th, it's kind of like once I go back to work, it's almost a little sad to come home and see the tree and know that the season is over. So usually I'll take it down before I go back to work. So we'll see if I get that done. But for now, it's still up, it's still lit, and still making me happy every time I see it. So I thought I'd record this last little bit of my last 2022 vlog here in front of the tree. So I've been this morning up and getting things done, including doing some journaling. Seems like a good time to journal as the year is drawing to a close and kind of think about what I want to do next year. I've been thinking about it, writing about it in my journal actually for a few days now, and today I finally kind of pinned down the few things that I want to do that I would call resolutions. I've never been, like most people, I would say probably most people aren't the best at keeping resolutions. Making them, yes, that's kind of the fun part, but keeping them sometimes is hard. And I think it's because a lot of the time the things we assign to ourselves are almost like a punishment. I know for me that's the case anyway. So a lot of the times it would be the same old usual suspects, of course, some kind of strict exercise and eating routine. I would assign, I need to practice the piano so many hours a week. I want to do these different piano events, so I need to be practicing all the time. I need to be doing scales and all this stuff. I mean, sometimes I would get really strict with myself on that to the point where the joy is out of it. And as a matter of fact, I haven't even touched my piano in months, which I'm hoping is something I can change going forward and just have fun with it instead of trying to make it into, you know, like a school assignment. Other things that sometimes will go on my list, things like regularly studying French. I took French in school, and periodically I'll try to refresh it just so I don't lose it altogether. And I do really enjoy it, but you know, again, it's like assigning yourself a school assignment, and when you're a busy adult that has responsibilities, a job, and other things, sometimes it can just get to be too much. And especially since I don't know any French people at this point that I can talk to. I'm not planning any trips to France anytime soon. So, you know, I don't know when you don't have a specific reason to be studying it, sometimes it can get a little hard to stay motivated. So actually this year I decided not to do anything kind of harsh, draconian, self-flagellating as my New Year's resolutions. Instead, I want to set some gentle goals for myself that are things that I think will add joy and pleasure to my life, and be kind of fun and enjoyable. So I think doing that gives me a much better chance of actually following through on these things. So I thought I would share with you what I have in mind. I have 6 things that I jotted down that I think will be good to do in the coming year. And again, I'm going to be gentle and flexible with myself. If something's not working out, I'll just drop it and move on, and I won't let myself feel bad about it, because the whole plan is to do things that will add to the joy and happiness of life, right? So picking on yourself because you didn't stick with something that you sort of arbitrarily set up at the beginning of the year just doesn't make sense. So first thing I have on my list is to continue journaling. So I have my pretty journal that I've started after finishing the last volume, and I'm doing well so far with continuing on with it. To me, at this point, it's become at least somewhat of a habit, and it's one I'd like to continue. You know, I'm not being strict with myself about how often or, you know, when I write in it, but when I feel moved, I'll use it. And I think it is finally starting to provide me with some benefits beyond just noting down what's going on a certain day. Like I said before earlier in this series of vlogs, that sometimes I feel like my life is too dull or mundane to be writing about, but I guess is really not the point. One thing Mitzi of Mitzi Reads and Writes mentioned when she left a comment on my earlier vlog about journaling was that she liked it because even though her life is quiet, it helps her to appreciate kind of the simple pleasures and the simple things of life. And I really love that. It really helped me see it in a new way, to see that, it doesn't have to be grand events. It can be just the beauty of everyday life that you are noting, or things you're working through in your mind and things you're thinking about. So I definitely want to continue on with that. But there's also just something, I think, sort of pleasurable about the experience of having a beautiful notebook, maybe writing with a fountain pen, which is what I've been doing, hearing that scratch of the pen on the paper, seeing the pages fill up. It's just something really pleasurable in that experience. So I think it definitely belongs in this list of things that I think will help bring me some enjoyment during 2023. The second thing I have on my list is letter writing. Good old-fashioned snail mail, pen on the paper, stamp on the envelope, letter writing. So this is a really old-fashioned thing. I know it's not something most people do anymore, and it's not something I do anymore either, to be honest, even though I'm old enough to remember days when I would write letters to my parents when I was away at camp or when I was away at college. I'd write letters to my sister, my aunts. I still have some copies of the letters we exchanged, which when I look at them now, they make me so happy, just to have that tangible written document. Once I got out of college, even email was around, but it wasn't as common. We didn't have texting, and my friends and I would keep in touch with letters. And of course, that just kind of all faded away. There's text now, there's, IMing, there's email, but there's just nothing quite like the written word that you sit down and think about and write in your own handwriting and send it through the mail. I think the kind of topics that you'll talk about in your letters, more of a slow living type of experience, are not the same type of things you will probably talk about in an email or a text. I think you'll give more thought to it. I think I do anyway. So my hope is to write at least one letter to every friend that I'm close to and send that to them. If they don't want to write back, or they don't have time, or don't have the inclination to write back, that's really fine. But I know it will bring them some joy, and I know it'll bring me some fun to write it and go through that experience with my pretty stationery, and just giving them something to look forward to in the mail. And if they do want to write back, or even start a more lengthy exchange of letters, that's just all the better. So yeah, I think that'll be a fun thing to do. So I am looking forward to doing some letter writing in 2023. The third thing that I have written down is related to reading. And I know a lot of people are motivated by some reading goals. For me, my reading goal is to read what I want, when I want. So I'm very much of a mood reader. Obviously, I intend to read the 12 or 11, I guess it is, books that are in the Kindred Spirits book club for the year, since that is just such a wonderful experience, and I'm really looking forward to that. But other than that, I love putting together TBRs, or piles of possibilities. That's really fun for me. But feeling like I have to read certain things, it just kind of takes some of the fun out of it for me. I like to just see what I'm in the mood for at any given moment and read without putting a lot of pressure on myself. Again, this is a hobby. This is something I do for fun, to relax outside of working hours, outside of adult real life pressures. So I don't really feel like adding extra pressure onto myself by being strict about what I read and when I read it. So I think it'll be good just to kind of, as usual, fly a little bit by the seat of my pants and see what I'm in the mood for during 2023. The fourth thing on my list is to get back into a good skincare regimen. So I used to be really good about this, and I would have my nightly routine of different face washes and exfoliation and serums and all of that, moisturizing, and kind of got out of the habit to where now, I wash my face, slap some lotion on there, and go to bed. So I'd really like to, especially as I'm getting older, get back into more of a skincare routine and finding the pleasure in doing that every evening. So I really love Paula's Choice. That's probably my favorite skincare line. She has a lot of science-based research in all of her products that she creates. And there's a wide range of products for different types of skin. So yeah, so I have quite a few of her products, and I'm looking forward to putting a more, leisurely routine in place every evening where I kind of wash my face, do all the different creams and things, and go to bed feeling like I've at least done a little bit for myself in a kind of pampering way. The fifth thing on my list is to get back in the habit of wearing jewelry. So I have a really wonderful collection of jewelry, especially earrings, and also some vintage jewelry that I've collected over the years. And I used to wear it all the time. I used to wear earrings almost every day, and I would almost feel incomplete if I didn't have earrings in every single day. And then COVID came, the pandemic came, working at home came, and just not seeing anyone. And I kind of got out of the habit. So, I really never wear earrings anymore or much of any other kind of jewelry. I work in a very, very casual work environment as well, which sometimes I think contributes to just not bothering with the jewelry. But I miss it. And it was something I always took great pleasure in, was finding, what do I want to wear today? What earrings do I want to wear? What other accessories do I want to wear? So I'm hoping to get back into that daily routine again, at least on work days or when I'm going to be out and about. The bad thing is, it's been so long, even though I had my ears pierced when I was 8 years old. So I don't think they've fully grown up. I don't know that they ever would, but they definitely are a little grown over. So trying to put earrings in right now is not the most comfortable experience. So I don't know if I need to get them kind of re-pierced, or if there's some process I can do myself to help with getting them back to where I want to wear earrings in them again. So I need to do a little research about that, but still, that is one of my goals. So you can look for me hopefully in a future video with some earrings and other jewelry. And the sixth and final thing that I have on my list is to watch more movies. So as you may have gathered from my previous video on my favorite Christmas movies, I really love films, especially older films from the studio system era, kind of the golden age of Hollywood from the 30s through the 60s. And there was a time when I would just watch so many movies every weekend. And kind of gotten out of the habit of that, other distractions. Part of it is reading more, which is good. A lot of it is watching more YouTube, which is good, but also takes up a lot of time. And then just other mundane things that you have to do when you're a homeowner, when you have a job that takes away some of the time you may have spent watching movies. So I really miss it though. And at this time of year, when I have a chance to sit down and watch Christmas movies or watch just old movies in general, I remember how much I love it and how much enjoyment it brings me. So one of my plans for this year is just to watch more movies. My goal hopefully is to watch one movie I haven't seen before every week. And I have a huge collection of movies, things I've recorded off TCM over the years, DVDs that I purchased over the years, many of which I have not watched yet. So sort of similar to my book collection, there's always a long list of TBWs, I guess you could say, to be watched. So yeah, so I'm hoping to watch more movies. That is something I'm really excited about during 2023. So that's it. That's my 2022 festive season vlog. I've really enjoyed doing this. It's been so much fun. And thank you so much to everybody who's watched, who's commented, who's subscribed over the past few weeks. I wasn't expecting much of anything, and I've had so many people be so kind and engaging about the content that I made during this period. So thank you so much. As far as the future of the channel, I don't know. I think I'll probably continue on with doing occasional vlogs, probably not weekly, because that does get a little bit overwhelming amongst other things that I'm doing. But definitely plan to keep going. It's such a fun creative outlet for me, and it's fun also to just engage with everyone who's watching and commenting. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful New Year's Eve and a New Year's Day that's safe and happy, and that the year ahead brings you so many good things, including lots of good books. See you soon. Bye.